Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you everyone for coming today for the presentation. Tonight we are presenting the joint report of Russian International Affairs Council and Vivekananды International Foundation, 70th anniversary of establishment of diplomatic relations between India and Russia, new horizons of privileged partnership. It is a great honor for us to be in the premises of Indian Embassy. We would like to thank His Excellency Ambassador and the Embassy for the hospitality. This report, which we are presenting today, is quite unique in many ways. And first of all, it's a joint effort. And what differs it from other similar papers, I guess, is that it was written as a joint text, not as a separate articles. So it touches upon many issues of Russian-Indian relations, which will be discussed today during the presentation. And His Excellency Ambassador kindly agreed to give his welcome speech, and I pass the word to His Excellency Ambassador Mr. Pankadj Sarran. Thank you.
So, maybe I'll speak from there. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Indian Embassy. It's a great pleasure to host you here today. As you know, this event is meant to launch the report prepared by the Russian International Affairs Council and the Vivekananды International Foundation. I want to welcome all colleagues from the Russian International Affairs Council, other media representatives from Russia, other members of the Russian think tanks, and of course, particularly warm welcome to Mr. Kordunov for being here with us. I also want to welcome Ms. Haриндер Сехон from the Vivekананды International Foundation, who has arrived in Moscow just this morning. This is a very important report for the reason that two important think tanks from India and Russia have got together over a period of many months to prepare a very comprehensive report on what is the future of the India-Russia relationship. The report is a very comprehensive document. It covers all sectors of our cooperation, and a lot of thought and hard work has gone into it. I would like to congratulate both sides for the effort that they have put into this work. It goes without saying that the India-Russia relationship today has become one of the most important partnerships in the world. In the last 2 years, we have seen a particularly intense interaction between our two countries in all spheres, and just to remind ourselves of the mechanism or the structure of the relationship, it was in the year 2000 that the two countries agreed to establish a strategic partnership. It was soon after President Putin was elected as president, so it has been 17 years since then. And one of the elements of the strategic partnership was to institute a system of annual summits. And it is very satisfying to note that in these 17 years, we have actually had 17 annual summits. So there has not been a single year in which we have not had an annual summit. This by itself, I think, is a commendable record for any two countries. In addition to that, that is at the apex level, but then at levels below that, we have two very high-powered intergovernmental commissions. One is the Intergovernmental Commission on Technical and Economic Cooperation, and that commission is led on the Russian side by Deputy Prime Minister Dmitry Rogozin today, currently, and on the Indian side by our External Affairs Minister. And this commission has below it a large number of working groups which focus on different aspects of the commission's activities. Here again, the record of the meetings of these commissions is very, very positive and very encouraging, and it has been meeting regularly. It's a live, dynamic commission. And the second pillar of the relationship is the Intergovernmental Commission on Military and Technical Cooperation. On the Russian side, it is led by the Russian Defense Minister, Mr. Sergei Shoigu, and on the Indian side, it is led by our Defense Minister, currently Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman. This year, we had the first meeting of another mechanism that we have established, again with very exciting prospects, and this is a high-level commission on science and technology cooperation. And this commission, whose first meeting was held in Novosibirsk in Russia, is co-chaired by Mr. Dmitry Rogozin on the Russian side and the Defense Minister of India on the Indian side. And for the first meeting this year in June, our delegation, the Indian delegation, consisted of 6 first deputy ministers from 6 of our key departments of the Government of India, which included the Defense Research and Development Organization, the Ministry of Defense, the Department of Atomic Energy, the Department of Space, the Ministry of Earth Sciences, and so on. So, and then again in June this year we had the annual summit for which our Prime Minister was in St. Petersburg. So I would say that the relationship is of a very intense nature, and the mechanisms are in place. What I would like to underline is that it is the strategic communities on both sides which need to become partners of this process. And for me, therefore, this work is of particular importance because it helps the two governments to look at new ideas and to see how we can improve our work even more. So I would like to compliment the openness, the frankness with which this report has been drafted. We have in fact broken new ground both in our interstate relations, but obviously this also is the breaking of a new ground where we have this kind of a report that is published. I'm also very happy to note that this coincides with a big event which will start tomorrow morning, again with the sponsorship of the RIAC. And again, I want to thank Mr. Kordunov and of course the chairman, Mr. Igor Ivanov, for putting this together. And it is not easy for such events to be organized. And of course, I also want to thank on this occasion the Director General of the Indian Council of World Affairs, Ambassador Nalin Suri, who has again arrived here in the morning today, leading 8 Indian think tanks. Again, it is not easy to bring 8 thinking people together in one group. So this is a unique achievement, but they're all united in their conviction that this relationship needs needs fresh thinking, and it's too precious to be left only to the two governments. I say that in a lighter way. But we need stakeholders, and I think what we have begun is something which is going to be extremely valuable for our future work. I, of course, also want to express my gratitude to the leadership of the VIF, who have been very instrumental in moving this initiative forward. So, all in all, let me congratulate both the organizations, both the institutions, and compliment them on their good work, and to say that I hope that this will encourage a greater community of strategic experts from both India and Russia to come together and to shape an even more exciting partnership, not just bilaterally, but definitely within our region, and of course even globally. So once again, my best wishes and hearty congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And now I pass the word to Dr. Andrei Kортунов, Director General of Russian International Affairs Council, who led the Russian part of the team who prepared the report. Mr. Kортунov, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Your Excellency, dear friends and colleagues, I'm very glad that I have an opportunity to be here in the premises of the Indian Embassy in Moscow and to see so many old friends from the Indian research think tanks and from Russian analytical centers, and also from Russian media and from the Russian Russian governmental agencies. I think that this is an important thing, and I guess that this is not a trivial event that we have right here. I'm looking at the portrait of Mahatma Gandhi, and I would like to cite one of the quotes of Mahatma Gandhi, which you all know, of course. Once he was asked about the Western civilization. What do you think about the Western civilization? And you know that his answer was that Western civilization, that would be a great idea. And if I can misquote Mahatma Gandhi, and refer his quote to the Indian-Russian relations, I would say a strategic partnership between Russia and India, that would be a great idea. Because we are talking about this strategic partnership for years, and there is natural affinity between Russia and India, and this affinity goes back into history. We are used to say that we have common interests, and there is a kind of natural mutual affection, but I think that we are always starting to build a strategic partnership. It would be a great idea, but we have to work really hard on both sides to make it work, especially in this very volatile, very dynamic, very diverse world of the 21st century. I hope that our report is a very modest contribution that can help to build this strategic partnership. But let me tell you once again that I don't think that we can take it for granted. I think it's important, and that was the idea which we all shared when we started working with the Vivekananды Foundation on this particular project. I have to tell you that we thought that our report might be different from other joint documents that we saw in plenty prepared by Russian and Indian partners. First of all, I think it was important for us to take a very sober approach to this relationship. Not to hide the problems, but rather to articulate the problems which are there. There are problems, And we should not be shy in identifying these problems. Second, I think that we tried, to the extent possible, to articulate differences in our approaches. Again, I think it's only natural that two big countries have different approaches to various international problems. We should not hide them. We should articulate them, and we should find a ways to reconcile our positions on important issues. And the third issue, we try to take a strategic look at our relationship. Something which is not limited to issues of today or tomorrow, but to think about what will happen the day after tomorrow, how India and Russia can position themselves in the world of the 21st century. 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road. I think independent think tanks, analytical centers have a responsibility to address strategic issues. We know that our respected diplomats and bureaucrats have their constraints. They have to think about a new summit meeting. They have to think about deliverables. We have to help them. We have to supply this strategic vision. And I'm afraid that, unfortunately, until recently, we didn't have too many papers that would focus on this strategic perspective of our relationship. On Russia and India in this very dynamic, very diverse, very volatile, very vibrant world of the 21st century. I have to tell you that it was definitely my pleasure, and it was pleasure of our associates at the Russian International Affairs Council to work with the Vivekananды Foundation. I have to say that we were received with a lot of hospitality in New Delhi. I can only hope that we can reciprocate in Russia as well. I have to underscore the commitment and the dedication and the enthusiasm of our Indian friends. We really appreciate that. Our report can be criticized. Definitely, it's not perfect. You might find some omissions there. You might find particular items there that can be criticized, that might raise questions. And I would like to underscore once again that it's not a final product. It's not something that is carved in stone. It's not 10 commandments that you have to take or to leave, but it is only an introduction or invitation to start a discussion. I hope that tomorrow, when we have a meeting between Russian and Indian think tanks, we will be in a position to start this discussion. And I would like to underscore once again that, in my opinion, the problem that we have to confront is so big, is so complex, that there is no place for institutional rivalry here. We all have to make contribution. We all can make this contribution. And I hope sincerely that think tanks and this second track cooperation might make an input and might be of assistance to our foreign ministries, to other governmental agencies working together. I think that this is something where we can make a real contribution. So let me offer you for your consideration the report. I hope that you will read it. I hope that you will have some questions to raise about the report. I hope that you can enrich it. I hope that it will be really a joint enterprise, not limited to the bilateral cooperation between the Russian International Affairs Council and the Vivekananды Foundation. Let me conclude with saying that this is not an average year. We commemorate 70 years after the establishment of the diplomatic relations between India and Russia. And definitely there are many things that we can take as accomplishments. But there are probably many more things that we can take as challenges. So I hope that we will be in a position to confront these challenges and to find new avenues for the development of this bilateral relationship, so our two countries can play an important role in building a new world order, the world order that will fit the needs and the requirements of our nations in the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kordunov, and I pass on the word to co-author of the report from the Indian side, Senior Fellow of Vivekananды International Foundation. This is Harinder Sehon, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, my sincerest thanks to Ambassador Saran for graciously hosting us this evening. I know a lot of effort has gone, and the kind of coordination which Yojana and Senya have undertaken, thank you for making it possible this evening. My sincerest thanks to Dr. Kordunov, who's flown halfway across the world to be present. And I think it's a pleasure. And I would also like to thank the ICWA and especially Ambassador Suri for making me a part of this delegation, which made it possible for me to come to Moscow, my first visit here, and I'm very happy to be here. After two erudite speakers, our Ambassador and Dr. Kordunov, there is very little left for me to say about the report and the work, but I would like to reiterate, and before I forget, Ambassador Sybil, the main author of the report, he conveyed his good wishes. He could not be present here, but he conveyed his good wishes, as did General Vich, who is no longer the director of the Vivekананды, but he was one of the moving forces behind this initiative, and he especially asked me to remember him to Dr. Kordunov. This report was the result of, we've been, I think, talking with the RIAC for over a year. And it started off, I think the first headway was made when I had a chance meeting with Dr. Kordunov in Tallinn on the sidelines of another conference. And he said, you know, we have MOU with the VIF, but we've not moved forward. And if we can, you know, initiate certain steps, and we would like to make this into a meaningful dialogue. And I think from there, the two sides got very serious about it. And there were a lot of differences, as was told by Dr. Kordunov. We did not agree, and I think that is what contributes to the vibrancy of the report. We have worked relentlessly and trying to have a common ground on certain issues. Where the differences were there, both viewpoints have been put across. And the most important aspect is that this is a joint paper, a joint report which sets out a vision for the future. There's a very comprehensive section which is devoted to the recommendations, and that was something which was very well thought out and discussed at online when we met in Delhi in March this year. And I think that is the culmination. And we no longer, and as Dr. Kordunov said, we do not see this as a final finished product. It has been decided that we continue with this engagement to look at more specific issues which have been mentioned in the recommendations. And especially over here, what I would like to say is that though India-Russia relations, they go back to 1971 when we signed the Treaty of Friendship with the Soviet Union. But since 2000, they have been re-incentivized because of the strategic dialogue which our two leaders hold every year. And though they have been traditionally state-driven, I think we've reached that level of comfort, and in a globalized world where the dynamics keep changing every day, we have reached a level where think tanks, media, and the average citizen, strategic thinkers, each one, and it should not be bound to an institution. I think it's a very wide open field. India and Russia are two big countries, important global countries, and I think there's enough scope for all of us to work collectively at different levels to re-energize and focus on the specifics to make this partnership more meaningful rather than a talking shop where we finish a 2-day meeting and then forget about what was talked in the next conference. And I think this is where we are fortunate at the VIF that we found very good partners in REAC, and we've already got ideas for the next conference and the specific issues which we will be addressing. Beyond that, I think I won't keep repeating myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sehon, and we have time for some questions. Anyone wants to start? Any questions?
Let me ask the first question, actually. What is the plan for the propagation and dissemination of the report? How are you planning to reach it to audiences in Russia and in India?
Well, if I might start, I think that for us it is important to have an impact on both the political constituency here, to make sure that this report is available to decision makers, and at the same time to have an impact on the research and academic community. And I'm happy that here we have people like Sergei Strokan, for example, who might help, who actually participated in drafting the report when we were to New Delhi in March of this year, and who can make sure that this report will get some traction within the Russian community. I think that it is also important to make sure that the report is well received and studied in our governmental agencies. And again, I'm happy to see Vladimir Sokolenko, to hear a person who is deputy head of the policy planning department of the Russian Foreign Ministry. I guess that our work might be of use in Russian governmental agencies. But let me tell you that, in my opinion, we should think about new innovative ways to promote the idea of Russian-Indian cooperation. If I might use this term, I think that we should make the Russian-Indian cooperation sexy. That it's not something just about Rabindranath Tagore and Leo Tolstoy. It's not just about Rarick, about the old things which we all appreciate and value, but it's about new phenomenon. And let me tell you, and of course you are probably, people here are in a better position than I am to talk about the modern India and about the modern Russia, but I think that in this country the innovative potential of India is still grossly underestimated. And we have to introduce the new India to the Russian society, the new opportunities, the new drive, the new technologies, the new Indian creativity. I think it is very important, and of course our report is a very small part in this whole picture. But I hope that our report will, and maybe not just our report, but our future work will be still a kind of visible part of this effort to promote a new vision of India in the Russian Federation, to demonstrate to Russians that India is not just a land of very rich culture. It's not just a land of traditions. It's not just a land of history. But it is also a land of opportunities. It's a land of opportunities for Russian businesses, for Russian entrepreneurs, for people working in IT, for people working in biotechnologies. And this is one of the challenges that we all face. I hope that together we'll be able to demonstrate to the Russian public that the India of the 21st century is not really a country that you can ignore. It's not a country that you can miss. It's a country that you have to focus on.
Thank you. We've got something similar to what Dr. Kordunov said lined up. This report is going to be put up on the website tomorrow. But once I return, and in the meanwhile, we'll be printing copies of this report for dissemination to our parliamentarians. And we are coordinating with the Eurasia Division of the Ministry of External Affairs. They participated in the conference and we met up, so they are also going to be a part of the release at the functions event which we have at the Vivekanaand next week. So that is one. And as Dr. Kordunov mentioned, I think one of the key takeaways or the recommendations of the report is greater cultural and student-to-student interactions. And I think while India sees Russia as an opportunity, a lot of students do come here, we need to have a similar interest in India in Russia, amongst the Russians. So that I think is something is going to be, we're going to be discussing tomorrow, and perhaps make it, one of the parts of our next conference. Thank you.
No, but do you, what would you comment on what Dr. Kordunov was saying about the image or the knowledge about Russia in India?
About as far as, I agree, it's very limited. Some segments of the students, they see it as an opportunity, and a lot of students come here for getting their medical degree, because in India the education is under so much of pressure. And Russia is seen as an option for students to come here and get their engineering and medical degrees and go back to India. So that level is there. The business community, I think, has been working, and as they discussed, we need to energize greater interactions amongst the business community. It is limited, but I think there is more awareness amongst Indians about Russia than amongst Russians about India. For them, it is still an India in a time warp about Raj Kapoor and Nargis, and that too maybe with the older generation. The younger generation, I find, does not really know India well. And so I think a greater effort needs to be made by India as well to do more events. We used to have those cultural events and all in the 70s and the 80s. So maybe something like that needs to be planned, and a greater outreach by India here in Russia.
Thank you.
Thank you. And colleagues, do you have any questions?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Can you have at least the text of this report?
It is available on the
Paper
table.
form. Not in internet, but in a paper form.
It is available on the table. Please take it.
Yes, brief comment on the question. First, I want to congratulate RIAC and the Vivekananды Foundation with that outstanding effort. When we were just drafting the whole thing, as Mr. Kordunov remembers, going word after word, we could have imagined that things will go so fast, and finally, this autumn, we will have this report. But as Mr. Kordunov said, a great idea, yes, but I think that all of us are well aware that what we need not just a great idea, but a great new reality. And of course, there's every opportunity and chance to make in the Russian relations new great reality, but this is a process. And that's why I personally don't think that this report, though it looks like a success story, can be reduced only to one report. So I would rather prefer to see it as a first volume, and maybe next year or whatever we'll see another editions of the reports, because the situation is changing very fast and it needs to be reflected. What I find, because since I had a privilege to see the report, at least the draft of the report, how it was worked out by two sides, and that was really an uphill battle. which successfully was won. I think what makes this report different from other reports is that this is not just academic blah blah. This is just an attempt to raise an easy questions and try to find the answers to that. I won't go into detail, but I would say that it was not only about the differences, different problems, but the author is not scared enough to talk about different vision and how to bridge the gap, and this is very important. The question of knowledge, which Ms. Sehon mentioned, is crucial, and this is not only about youngsters. When head of one of the Russian leading energy companies is saying Kitaiцы and Indusi, meaning Chinese and Hindu, Putin making common mistake saying that Indians and Hindu are the same. And I wish I'm wrong, but I think that if you ask Russian parliament members, maybe half of them will make the same mistake and will say Indusi instead of Indians. So that shows that huge effort has to be done. So that's sort of my brief comment on that. But my question is whether you have this. I understand this was a short span of time, but still, whether you've seen or got some feedback already. You've seen how your words, which were well articulated in this report, got some feedbacks from diplomats, policymakers, or whatever, because this is not an immediate question. Like in art, you see, in science, whatever, what is important not only to say, but to be heard. When you heard, or are you expecting it to be heard? And are you going to monitor this feedback? Because this is a crucial thing. This is the reason why you're writing this. And in future also, reciprocity. And this is the question to both Mr. Kordunov and Ms. Sehon. Thank you.
Excuse me, I'm carrying.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Then you can continue.
Mhm. Absolutely, yeah. Thank you. Well, let me just start, and definitely I think that I will express only my viewpoint. In Russian-Indian relations, there is such thing as political correctness. And usually we avoid raising questions which might look sensitive, which might look difficult, or which might look inappropriate for the other side to respond. And I think that one of the advantages of this enterprise, which you were an active part to, was that we tried to put aside political correctness and to raise the questions which might otherwise look sensitive and even inappropriate. For example, Russians are concerned, or at least some Russians are concerned about the Indian-American relations, and some think that, well, maybe India is gravitating towards the United States to the detriment of our bilateral relations, and that the United States is hijacking India, so to say. On the other hand, many in India are concerned about China. They would say, well, you Russians, you're just betraying our long-term partnership, and you have a love affair with Chinese, and you abandon this long-term tradition of the Russian and Soviet-Indian relationship. They are very concerned about the Russian relations with Pakistan, and I think quite understandably why Russians are engaging in this new partnership with Pakistan. Of course, Afghanistan and Taliban is another very important and sensitive issue for Russia and India. We might have different views on Taliban and its role in the future of Afghanistan. So for me, it was very important to articulate these differences, to make sure that we do not somehow push dust under the carpet, but we are ready to discuss these issues. And I think that was exactly what might be of interest to our governmental agencies. We got a couple of positive reactions from the Foreign Ministry, from the Security Council, from other governmental agencies and various ministries, and basically their point was that it is important to articulate the problems. Maybe these problems are artificial, maybe these problems are caused by misunderstanding, or maybe these problems are real. And if they are, then we have to see how we can reconcile the differences of our opinions. Because definitely for Russia, India is a very important strategic partner. Its role cannot be underestimated. And if our Indian partners voice concerns or some questions about the Russian foreign policy, these concerns and these questions have to be addressed. There is no doubt about that. We value our relations with New Delhi. We value our relations with India. This is not a second-tier relationship. For Russia, it is definitely a strategic partnership, and we intend to keep it as it is. Now, I think it was important that our report was released before the BRICS meeting in China, because it was there. We all know that just on the eve of this summit meeting, there were some complications between India and China, and definitely that was one of the questions to be discussed, not only in the bilateral Indian-Chinese framework, but also, between the countries which claim to be major Eurasian powers. It's about the Indian partnership with the Shanghai Cooperation Agreement and its entrance to Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So I would tell you, though I might be biased in my own way and opinionated, but I would tell you that in my opinion, in my view, this report met a lot of interest from governmental agencies, from a number of Russian ministries, and we got some input which will be important for us to define our priorities for our future work with our Indian partners. I hope it is also the case with the Indian side, but let me emphasize once again that it's not easy because sometimes we have to address very sensitive issues. And not everybody in the government is ready to be blunt and open about these issues. Sometimes they try to avoid them, and it's our responsibility as independent think tanks to articulate the problems. Because it's easy to talk about accomplishments. It's easy to talk about what we have achieved together. But I think that our integrity as scholars, as researchers, as thinkers, is not to limit ourselves to accomplishments and to success stories, but to talk about problems and to talk about ways in which we can address and hopefully resolve the problems.
In India, actually it was, is it okay?
Push the button, please.
This report.
Just take this one.
The initial part of this report, the version of this report was released on 1st June when our Prime Minister came to St. Petersburg for the economic summit. So the report in India did get a lot of traction at that time. And we've received some inputs which have found their way, into some of the text over here. And Dr. Kordunov has already articulated the differences, where we had to moderate the text, and there was a lot of brainstorming on certain issues. And China was, of course, China and the United States figure very prominently in the report itself. Also, there is in the foreword, as Trupnikov has written, that Russia would like us to be a part of the Chinese Belt Road Initiative. This is something which is not finding any takers in India, for the simple reason that we see that a part of the Belt and Road passes through our disputed territory, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor part of it. And that is where India would like Russia to do more, keeping Indian interests in mind. When it comes to the United States, I think it was discussed, and I hope we were able to satisfy that that relationship is not at the cost of India's relationship with Russia. With the United States, we are looking to them for some weapons, military sales, technology transfer, because there is a feeling that, though the Indian defense industry is still, defense armed forces, 70% of the base is still Soviet Union. But I think Russia was not able to take care of India's technological concerns and demands and what we were looking for. So India was forced to look elsewhere. And that is the reason where we've gone not just to the United States, but we are also going through an open tender system with the Europeans when it comes to weapon supplies. We are hoping, and that points mentioned in the report, that Russia, as it modernizes, it prioritizes the scientific and technological aspect of its development. Some of India's concerns would be addressed, because at the end of the day, there is complete trust in these matters between India and Russia. But some of the procedural bottlenecks need to be done. So these are things which, we do discuss with our interlocutors in the National Security Council and all. They wanted to know, what is its view on certain aspects which are mentioned in the report. So it has got a lot of traction, and as I mentioned when I was making my opening remarks, this is not intended to be a one-off report. Neither is it intended to be a one-off conference what we had in Delhi. We are going to be looking at specifics and and perhaps moving forward on one or two critical issues on every subsequent conference. It's not that we'll have a general conference which will cover everything. Maybe we'll take up a few specifics like maybe South Asia, Afghanistan, and India, Russia, United States doing something together. How do we, move forward when it comes to that? How does India balance its relationship between? There's no question of a balance actually. We have a time-tested friendship with Russia. With the Americans, in fact, it's a new emerging dynamic. But there is greater soft power meeting of the minds between India and the United States, even at the height of the Cold War. And that is where I think India and Russia need to work a lot more. Both sides need to do, and these kind of delegations are at one level. And when I talked about students, you see the business community and all does have its institutionalized mechanisms. The business lobbies like the Confederation of Indian Industries do come, so they do. But when I talk about the youngsters and the students, there is no platform really, like the United States or the Europeans. They have been leading these cultural exchange, which may have happened during the Soviet time, but it is not. The Bolshoi Ballet the Swan Lake was in Delhi. It was a sellout. It was a sellout. So there is this great interest, but we need to do more and not leave it confined only to New Delhi. Take it to the states in Russia and the states in India.
Yeah, if I might add just for a second, Nicola, I think that we take the Russian-Indian cooperation for granted. I think there is a danger in this assumption, because the world is changing. And if I were to make a parallel between the Russian and Indian relationship and the family life, I would venture to say it's like a marriage without kids. It might be a too strong statement, because indeed, there are major partnerships, contracts in the defense sector, in the energy sector, and in some others. That's not really good enough. I think that we have to be more ambitious.
Very definitely.
And we have to make sure that our partnership reflects the new priorities and the new challenges that the countries face in the 21st century. And let me emphasize once again what has been said already. It's not a partnership that should be targeted against any other country, be it China or the United States or Pakistan or any other state in Asia or in the world. But this is a partnership which has its own rules, which has its own rationale, and which has its own momentum for development. And let me just conclude by saying that, the Russian International Affairs Council and the Vivekananды Foundation cannot do it alone. We can just, and we tried to somehow launch a process. And the success of our effort will depend on the commitment of all of you sitting here in this room, and not just in this room, but also in many other rooms in Moscow, in New Delhi, those who feel that they are really committed to building this new relationship. I think that our relationship has great potential, but unless all of us are ready to invest into this relationship, all of us are ready to somehow make a contribution to that, I'm afraid we're not going to move too far. So definitely we consider everybody here and everybody in this community to be our potential partners and to be potential stakeholders in building the relationship which really reflects the realities of the 21st century.
Okay.
And if I can just, I definitely agree with you. And if, I talked about soft power, and that is where I think there's tremendous Russian soft power as well. But we can't, it cannot be left to the governments, it has to be a people to people. And that is where the two governments would need to facilitate that level of interaction and travel between the two countries. That is one very important aspect which, I think when you travel to Russia, and I'm sure if Russia finds the same problem, I think we need to facilitate greater travel and tourism. Tourism is happening, it's picked up, but it needs to be more. It needs to be, more of student exchange program, 6-week program at different levels. Institutional mechanisms, say between a university over here and a university. Now that is the kind of interaction, because then that is the next generation which would take this relation, so it is a continuous, sustained effort.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sindh. Thank you very much, Mr. Kordov, and His Excellency, who is unfortunately already left. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I thank everyone for coming in tonight. And if anyone wants to proceed, there is going to be a coffee break in this room. So thank you very much.